tandem comedy. That's what's coming up on The Art of Bombing, episode 141.
My friend Dan, he's got a podcast, 'cause all comics need a podcast, and nobody had a podcast called The Art of Bombing. So Dan went out and bought a tape deck. Who knows why he bought a tape deck? Podcasts don't get played on tape decks, but Dan is from the 80s. So hey there, all you funny jerks, come talk to Dan about your work. Tell him all about your worst times. It's The Art of Bombing.
Welcome to a brand new episode of The Art of Bombing. I'm Dan Bublitz Jr. It is Tuesday, June 16th. I hope everybody's week is going well so far. It is early in the week, but either way, I hope it's going good for you wherever you are and whatever you're doing. And thanks for tuning in and listening to The Art of Bombing. I got a great guest today. Today my guest is Tim Harmston, and we had a great conversation, and I'm looking forward to sharing that with you. Before we get to that, let's handle some business, if we have any business. I think the only business I really have today is, if you haven't done so already, make sure you subscribe, make sure you like, make sure you share the content, go on the, give us a retweet, give us a share on the Facebook, tell a friend about the podcast, and make sure that you leave a nice 5-star review and a rating. Maybe say some nice words about The Art of Bombing. That would be greatly appreciated. Let us know that you're into the show and you're trying to get other people into the show. We really appreciate it. Also want to say thank you, because we have hit over 20,000 downloads. That's right. Our little show plugging along for the last 3 years. We have now hit over 20,000 cumulative downloads, and I'm very excited for that. I think that's all I've really got today for business. I don't have any upcoming shows yet, but as soon as I do, I'll keep you in the loop-de-loop. I guess one thing before I get into the show, I do have my new show, Renewed, that I've been doing, the online show, live show. I'm trying to work on the format a little bit and change it up. I'm going to have multiple guests on that. I'm still trying to get some interest and get some people booked for that. But that show will be coming back eventually, just to let everybody know. So, all right, now that I made that announcement, let's get into this conversation with Tim. All right, here we go. Enjoy. How have you been keeping busy? I see you said you were doing a little bit of construction and stuff. But...
Yeah. I've never been busier with stuff that's not comedy.
I know how that feels.
Yeah, I do a lot of painting. I'm a good painter, and I do. I can do construction, and I'm building stuff for my mom and my mother-in-law, building her a patio. Just trying to keep money coming in,
Yep. Oh, no, absolutely.
I don't know when comedy money will come back. So I've just sort of, forged ahead with whatever I can find. So,
yep. I mean, that's all we can really do.
Yeah.
That's true. Yeah, I've been trying to keep busy doing home improvement stuff too. Trying to keep content coming, but then I've been doing a lot of stuff around my house. So
yeah, it's amazing how much crap you can do if you really think about it. Like all the sort of come flooding at once.
Yes, they do. Yep. Yeah, and we just bought this place when we moved up here, so we're trying to do a little bit of improvements here and there. So when when it comes time for us to move or whatever, maybe get a little bit extra out of it.
Yeah.
So.
Elbow grease, they call it. Yeah.
Yeah, that's exactly what we're doing. Putting the work in. But it's good, though, because it's a good distraction, too.
Yeah, no kidding. Man.
Yeah, that's for sure. So, well, yeah, this is cool. We'll get into the podcast part of this. So we'll go right into the art of bombing. Yeah. Which, I'm anxious to hear. You've been doing comedy for a while, all over, and I'm anxious to hear what kind of story you have for a bad show or a time when you felt like you bombed.
Well, the worst show that, obviously I've had a lot of them, probably more than the normal comedian. I've done a lot of, corporate shows. Sometimes they go off the rails if it's not right. Club shows, club shows, when you bomb on a club show, it's not really, you don't notice it as much. You're like, oh, that show sucked. There's nothing like, but when you're put in a position where it's not normal to do comedy, like at a, I don't know, like a summer fest or some sort of weird thing where, it's not all under your control. And that tends to be the worst bombing. But the worst bomb that we've ever, I should say because it was a Tim and Mary Mack show, headline show, and it was for a company. I won't name names of the company, but it was a giant holiday party with about 700 people.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and it was in a giant convention center with, like super high ceilings. So it was like being in, like any giant convention center.
Yeah.
Really unlimited ceilings. So you're not going to hear a lot of laughter anyway. But so about a month before about a month before the show, we found out that the president of the company had passed away. And, so they were kind of on the fence about whether they should proceed with the show, and then it turns out that about a week before, they're like, yeah, let's do it. It'll be like a celebration, like trying to put like a positive spin on it. And then we're like, okay, so we get there, and then we're going over the order of events, and they're like, it'll be. We're going to have like a eulogy, which is
oh my God.
Eulogy and comedy never seem a good connection together. And so, and we're like, well, how long is that eulogy part going to be? And they're like, well, we have about 3 or 4 speakers. And, that never goes the way it should, because that turns into everyone doing a half hour, and then you're suddenly at 2 hours of eulogy. We could see it. It's just unfolding. And
absolutely.
and then it was, so, the patriarch of the company had, they put his photo up of him as a young man in the Navy, presumably in like World War II or whatever. And they projected it behind the stage. He was huge. It was like 50 feet wide by 50 feet tall of this guy. And so they had projected that up there, and we're like, oh boy, that'd be great if that came down while we're doing our comedy show, because you never want to perform in front of a guy that's, no longer with us, I guess. And then to make matters worse, it was like a Flappers themed Christmas party where, like the 1920s. So they had these giant like peacock feather table center things with these giant peacocks, and no one could really see. They were all like looking around. You could see. And then they gave away. So we bargained that they would give away prizes after the eulogy, give away some really nice prizes to kind of pick up the mood. And so when the eulogy was over, it was about a 2-hour eulogy with a lot of tears and crying and family members. And then everybody got up and went to smoke or get a drink, also like 700 people. And then in response, as like a knee-jerk reaction, the current president was like, well, let's start the comedy show. That'll get everyone back in. And that never.
Oh, no.
The reflex to like, how do you solve this with comedy? And it's like, it's a reflex that never seems to work. And so we ended up, he just rushed. Mary went first, and she went up and I'm in the back. I'm like, this is seldom do things go as badly as you kind of think they are going to go. And this was the exact opposite. This is like every step just went worse and worse. And so Mary went up, and everybody was like either leaving to get a drink or going to smoke. And they didn't take the giant projection of the deceased former company head off the stage. So she's up there in front of him doing her routine. And to nobody. Basically, everyone had left, and then she brought me up really quick because she's like, well, maybe this will change the energy. You're looking for anything to change the energy.
Yep.
And it seemed to make it worse when I gave us because people didn't know that we were like a husband and wife comedy team. And so at this point we've got about 45 minutes left and it's just us. And we're like literally just talking to each other through microphones. Like, well, what do you think of this? We're just literally no one's listening. And except maybe like one table is out of sympathy. And so seven people started to trickle back in. And so then we have 700 people it's like a nightclub now. Everyone's drinking and hugging and crying because of this eulogy. And I could see just people shedding tears and Kleenex. And we're up there in this weird energy of mourning and sadness up to trying just with microphones trying to do our jokes. And we're just laughing. We're just like, this isn't possible how bad this is going. And no one's listening. I mean, it was just terrible. And then you get to that part where you're like, well, do we just get off stage? Because that's what the people's faces are saying, that the ones that are looking at us are like, they're like trying to send you like, go off the stage, and we're like, but we're always, we're good people. So we want to honor the contract. It says do an hour and, and it's like the slowest time. It's like, I think I went through every joke I had in maybe 20 minutes and we don't have any more jokes. So we're just like improvising and trying to talk to people in the crowd. And, so anyway, we just sort of wrapped it up. And it's bad when you say like, well, I guess that's it for us. And like, there's no response. Just,
oh, jeez.
Or nothing. And then we're just like,
not even a we're thankful you're leaving or anything.
Yeah. So we just sort of like slowly walk off the stage, and some of the family of the gentleman who passed away were there, and they were nice enough to kind of pull us over. They were like, "We're so sorry," like that was the only thing that really made it sort of palatable, like, well. Mm-hmm. And sometimes you get these high level decisions where you're like, do we proceed with the show or do we cancel the show? And this was just a decision that should have been made the other way on all parts, all parties. But we parked our car out in front of the convention center, and it was like, I don't know, 40 below zero. And we get in the car, and there's like a little silence, where we're like, we both felt, you're just dripping with that awful feeling. Oh, you're like,
oh, yeah.
And then I would say by the time we got back on the highway, 10 minutes later, we were laughing and laughing and laughing. And that was the best moment in probably comedy, because we both realized that it doesn't matter. Sometimes it's so far out of your control. We all want to do well, but that one was so painful that there was just nothing we could do. There's literally nothing we could do. And we just laughed about it. And we always said, well, that's the story of the worst show we've ever done. And so
it's beautiful that you got to experience it with someone else. Cause a lot of times that moment you're talking about, that dread, it's a comic by himself driving home from the corporate gig, debating on whether or not to swerve into a sidewall or not.
I've had a lot of those. I mean, I've definitely had, there just one other story. I did one about, 10 years ago. I did a holiday party for a farm equipment company in Wisconsin. And again, I won't name any names, but it's like a farm agriculture.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But like guys that like wear overalls to the company party, and hats, and came right off the farm. And, those are really quality, salt of the earth people. And I never seemed to do well in front of that crowd. But about 10 years ago, I did it. I just bombed. I mean, it was bad, and then and then last year I got an email and this same company reached out again. And I think they forgot who I was, or they forgot that I bombed their party a long time ago. So I was like, yeah, I'll do it. Man, how often do you get a second chance to redeem yourself? And this time I bombed twice as bad. Like,
oh no.
Like they hated me. I was so in my head about like wanting to like, walk away redeemed that I just tanked that one really bad. And that's a 2-hour drive home through the Wisconsin, countryside that hurts pretty bad. But,
yeah.
But to be honest, like none of them hurt as much as they did when you first started. I don't know how you feel, but.
I absolutely. When I was first starting, bombing was a lot harder on me than it is now. Even since I started doing this podcast, I've gotten better how I feel and how I I could bomb at an open mic and it was like the worst thing. Now, if I bomb at an open mic, I'm like, well, I'm just trying to get something accomplished here. Yeah. I don't really care. The ones that hurt the most are like the corporate stuff that you're talking about. And you brought up a good point too. A lot of times you do those corporate gigs and it's not going well, and everybody in the room knows it's not going well.
Yeah.
And you're getting the looks of, you need to get off, but in your head, because you're trying to be professional, you're trying to fulfill your contract. So it's like you're caught in that rock and a hard place. It's like, do I finish the contract, or would they just appreciate it if I just left now? Like, I don't know, but we're like, well, I got to honor the contract. So we keep going.
Yeah. And I think a lot of times you get into things where it's a special occasion and you don't want to be the person that ruins it. It's like like the company's 40th anniversary or whatever, and it's whenever there's like a thing attached to it, you definitely don't want to ruin it.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah, you don't want to be the reason it was bad for everybody, even though by performing it might be.
Yeah. And there's always, times it doesn't go well, but I think that's, you learn that there obviously now with this stupid pandemic, there's going to be the perspective is going to be a lot different for comics.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
Or 100,000 people died, but my little meltdown at open mic, it doesn't really have the same significance.
That's very, very true. That is for sure. Now, I've seen you perform with your wife. And you guys do some tandem comedy, going up together. Is that something you guys had always done, or just kind of started doing in the last few years? And how is that for that? Because you don't see a lot of tandem style comedy nowadays. Like that's not.
Yeah, well, we've been doing it for, as long as we've known each other, we've done a little bit. It was mostly just kind of dabbling at a open mic or or just some, and then over the years, as the material started to accumulate, we started to do it more often, and sometimes just as a break, just as something different to do. And then recently, the more people see that we do that, the more we get requested to do it as a couple. So we were just starting to get to a place where we had about an hour of couple stuff, and then the pandemic hit, and so I don't know where we'll leave off. It's hard if you don't practice those live.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's comedy in general. That's one of them things where it's not that easy to just look in the mirror and practice, comedy. Like if you're a musician, you can sit at home and play the guitar and work on that craft over and over. But any kind of comedy is not really the same.
Yeah. But we like doing it, but we don't want to do it very often. We don't want to do it too much because then it would kind of lose its its uniqueness, or we don't want to overdo that, but it's fun. I mean, we like to do it, and we've been doing a format too where if a club wants us to work together, then we do 30 each, and then 20 to 30 together at the end, and it usually turns into a lot more. So that's like a 90-minute thing where it's like you get a little individual performance and then a together thing, and so
it's kind of a nice mix up, I suppose, doing it that way. And I could see too where not wanting to do it together all the time, because you guys are both individual comics, obviously great comics aside, and then it seems like with comedy, like if you do something that's really good and then people want it more and more, it ends up becoming almost like a demand, and it's not necessarily what you want, like it's forced on you, if you will.
Yeah, it's got to feel organic, It can't feel, I mean, we do all different types of venues and stuff, but it's got to feel organic and fun. Because if we're not having fun doing it, then it's pretty obvious to the audience.
Yeah.
So, but we did about 4 or 5 shows in the last 6 months together, and that was about the right amount. It was really fun and fresh, and we were just starting to work on new concepts, and it's all silly, dumb stuff, but it's we're starting to kind of break into a new, like a different creative avenue with it. So
were you guys, because you guys did like a camping summer tour last summer or fall, like right after I'd moved here, and I'd seen you guys at a couple shows here doing your tandem style comedy, and it was great. Is that what you guys did on your tour, or was it just kind of dabbled with that a little bit too?
Yeah, we did a big mix of small venues, small independent clubs, small theaters, and then some like Funny Bone kind of comedy clubs along the way. And each one was like a different setup. Like sometimes if they had openers already on the bill, then we would just do, sometimes Mary was kind of billed as the headliner. And so I would just feature, and then we'd do like 10 minutes at the end. But yeah, we did, very, and depending on who slept the most, we would do.
That's fair.
Yeah. Like we left on June, I think it was like June 4th or 5th or something like that. And it rained the first 21 days.
Oh no.
Yeah. It just followed us across the country to the East Coast, and just rained and rained and rained and rained. And we're like sleeping in Walmarts, and not in the Walmart, but in the parking lot.
Yeah, in the parking lots. Yeah. Oh, I know exactly what you're talking about. I've spent time in my car in a Walmart parking lot overnight.
I'm like, oh, nice.
Yeah.
But it was fun. I mean, the whole point of it was to get lobster rolls in Maine. So that was basically
that's great.
The whole tour, because we were out in Maine. God, I don't know how long ago. A couple years ago, we went to Portland, Maine. Such a cool place, just a great town. And we're Midwest people, so we don't know, lobster rolls and shrimp and oysters and all this stuff. And then by the time we were done, we were like, we have to come back. We have to come up with a reason to come back here and eat our weight in seafood, because it was so good. It was so good. So we devised this tour that took us to Maine, Portland, Maine, and then Bangor. And we did about 30 days, 30 shows in about 35 days. So.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's a good reason to go out to the East Coast too. Oh. Even I'm not even a big seafood eater, but it's I've had lobster in Maine, and it was pretty good. Even though I'm not a big fan, but it was still good. I always find this interesting too, because you don't see a lot of comedy couples. I mean, they do exist. I mean, maybe they do more than I realize. But do you feel like being a comedy couple has helped with your material? Do you guys work together? Is it, because sometimes people are so competitive too. Like, does that ever kind of transpire, if you will?
I don't know. I feel like we never talk about the guts of jokes. We might say, do you think this premise is funny? But we never break down the nuts and bolts of what, if we hear each other do a joke at an open mic, and then we might say, oh, that was great, I really like that, or whatever. But we try not to bring I think when you're new to comedy, there's a lot of like breaking it down and like, analyzing it.
Yep.
Like we're kind of we're old enough now where we kind of know we don't need to do that with each other, unless we're doing if we're running like a TV set or some kind of thing where we really need to focus on, I might ask for help, but we don't really bring that into the house too much. So, but as far as the duo stuff, that's usually just individual jokes that get sort of entered into the duo act. Like she'll joke about something and then she'll bring it to the table, and then I'll write a joke about, whatever. And then that'll come in, and then we'll find where the other person gets to participate in that particular joke and kind of carve out a space for it. So.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I suppose, I don't know. I find the tandem comedy so interesting. I don't know why. When I lived in San Diego, there was a couple guys that they were really good friends, and they would do tandem once in a while, and they had such a great chemistry together. And, it was just always fun to watch.
Yeah, I do too. I've got that Rory Scovel, the Canadian guy, John Doerr, Rory Global thing. That was such a great sort of eye opener for what duo comedy can do. And it's been around forever, obviously, but that was kind of like, oh yeah, you can really be creative and have fun. And I think for a while we were always worried it would be kind of cliche to have a husband and wife, should be some Vegas.
Yeah.
But I feel like married people are really attracted to that thing because it's all relatable, so when we do it, I feel like you just not even have to be married, just relationship humor has a certain common thread between anyone.
Absolutely. People could it's definitely relatable to a lot of people, obviously. Now, you were talking about the dreadful feeling. I've coined that as the bumming of bombing. You were talking about it after the show that you guys experienced together. I like asking this question and how it's changed since you started doing comedy versus where you're at now in your career. How long does that feeling typically follow you?
After bombing, like post bombing. If it's a bad corporate thing, it usually sticks with me for about 24 hours. And then if it's a bad club thing, I usually think about it for a half hour.
Yeah.
By the time I go to bed. I just also like the other thing too that I've experienced a lot lately is because I do a lot of shows in the area. And so you always run into like people that, in the audience, like, oh yeah, I went to high school that you were, stuff like that. And there was a show I bombed in January where one of the people that I went to high school and her husband were in the crowd, and I didn't really realize it till I was seeing them from the stage and bombing. And so, that was tremendously upsetting because they came up to me and they were, when they say like, great job, they don't really.
Nope. They're just being nice.
Yeah. Oh, that's fun. Yeah. That hurts because you can sense the BS, you're like, they didn't mean that. And so that's always that I get more angry or upset when there's people that I know in the audience. If it's if I'm in Salt Lake City and I don't know anybody in the crowd and I bomb, I won't think about it much. But if I'm in, Wisconsin somewhere and half my family and relatives and friends are in the crowd, then it hurts a little bit more. So.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. I definitely feel the same as far as like the show is what really determines how long that feeling lasts for me now.
Yeah.
It used to be every time I bombed, it was like, this sucks, and that feeling would just bother me forever. And now it's like, well, it really depends on what's what, because corporate gigs, those are the ones that I for me are the worst, because if I bomb that, because you always have to go ask for that check, and it's like, oh man, I just ate crap and now I have to go ask for that paycheck.
Yeah.
And you just feel so almost skeezy asking for the money after not doing so well.
Yeah. And I also find the older I get, the more excited I am for the challenge, like when it's a really bad setup and you try to figure out a way. You're like, how am I going to make this work? If there's a TV on that they won't shut off, or the boss is drunk, or or whatever the case is. If there's a challenging or you have to follow a celebrity speaker, or you have to follow a sad thing or whatever,
Mm-hmm.
And your heart starts to beat. They're doing like a cancer award to the one of the people that they lost their husband to cancer, and then they do comedy. I always, whenever I am able to do a good show after those things, that's even better. I mean, that's the best kind of feeling good. That's not bombing, that's the reverse of bombing. But whenever you overcome something, that's like,
yep.
That's the best part of the job. Is just,
absolutely.
Meeting a challenge and then figuring out how to work around it. And, and then the older you get, the more you realize that sometimes you can't work around it. And sometimes you have a bad day, and that's bombing, and that's okay. So,
yeah, that's definitely true. And some of the stuff you were talking about trying to follow at a private event, it's amazing because I've had a lot of conversations where everything you mentioned came up in somebody's story.
Yeah.
It had to do with either somebody died, or a cancer thing, or something really sad, and then follow it with comedy.
Yeah,
and then it never worked.
I did one. It was one of the last ones I did before the quarantine, and they had a speaker come in and talk to the audience about meth and the toll that meth takes on the community. And they had like a slideshow. It was like a community event. And they had pictures of people with their faces scratched off and everything. And they're like, no, let's get some comedy up here to lighten the mood, Boy.
Yeah. Oh, that's so great. I did a holiday party for some teachers. And they didn't do anything like sad. Like, they were giving away prizes and stuff before, which is great. But they had a slideshow going of, like, pictures of the teachers and the school and just things like that going. And it was funny. It just reminded me because they didn't stop it. So, like, when I was up there, they had this slideshow going. It wasn't behind me. It was off to the side. And it auditorium, banquet hall, whatever, full lights. I can see everybody not watching or paying attention. They're all like, this is so awkward because I wasn't doing very well. And so they're like they're all watching the slideshow instead of trying to pay attention to the comedy show. But like that, it just reminded me, the slideshow thing reminded me of that. Yeah. And I even called him out. I was like, man, this is so weird. I was like, I can see all of you. Like, it is so bright. I can see all of you watching the slideshow because I'm doing so horrible. And then, of course, that would get a laugh or whatever. But, oh, man. Corporate shows, they're fun and also traumatizing.
Yeah. Yeah, it's like a daredevil. You're a daredevil, basically.
Yeah, absolutely. You never know what you're going to get into. What do you do to analyze sets as far as, like, if you feel like do you look more at shows where you bombed to see what went wrong and what you can do to do better, or even, like, on a good set?
Well, material, changes. You find out which jokes don't work repeatedly. You know, like, well, maybe that one, I should get rid of that one and try to write a better joke for that. But the analyzation that I do isn't really with the act. It's more about how can I make the environment better for, at least for private shows, private functions. How can I make everyone feel like they're at a comedy club so that this goes better for everyone? Because sometimes, like you said, you're bombing because there's a slideshow going on to your right or left, or sometimes there's a bar set up right next to the stage, and people are waiting in lines for drinks while getting, loud and conversational right now. How can you go in and set the lights up so it favors, focusing on, just stuff like that, just stuff that environmental stuff. But as far as when I bomb, do I try to fix, analyze and fix anything? I don't think so. I just go on, and if I believe a joke is funny, I'll just keep trying it until I prove it, or it's not, and I'll throw it out.
Until it proves you wrong.
Proven wrong several million times. So.
That's a good way to look at it. Now, speaking of corporate gigs, because you're talking about that you do a lot of corporate stuff now, and you try to find the environmental things. When you get approached to do a corporate gig, do you do like a lot of like pre-screening as far as like questionnaire type stuff to kind of get an idea of what you're getting into?
Yeah. Oh yeah. I like to have everything kind of out in front, so there's no surprises, and there's always surprises that you try to deal with as professionally as you can. But yeah, that's a big thing. I've had people say, we're going to have the Packer game on in the background, if that's okay. And I'm like, that's not okay. Or we're going to have the buffet in the back of the room, so while you're performing, people can go back and get seconds if they, stuff like that. Yeah. You're like, no, that's not going to work. Or what, like you just kind of prep the thing, and hopefully they're understanding. It's just that, with comedy, not everybody, if you're not in the business, you don't know sort of the basics sometimes of what'll help a show or what'll hurt a show. So.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I was talking to another comic that does a lot of corporate gigs, and that was his big thing. Like, he got to the point where he said he has a big questionnaire before. As soon as they're approached, he sends them a big questionnaire, and if they answer it, then he can go from there. If they're like, well, we're not interested anymore, yeah. It's like, well, I feel like I did some good vetting then, because...
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, it's definitely, and it's a learned thing too, where you have to have it go wrong a few times before you're like, oh, I need to ask about this or ask about that, and ask who the and I'm a big lighting snob. Like, lighting to me is super important to focus people. Mm-hmm. Comedy clubs that I work at, you go on and it's overly lit, or it's not, the audience is too bright or stuff like that. I'm always a big, I know Todd, I don't know if you know Todd Glass, but he's like a big lighting freak. Like he'll dim the lights, and sometimes, when, put up his own lights, and he's like super, even the green room has to be a certain level of lighting, and I'm almost at that level. Where, yeah, he's notorious for that. And I don't blame him, because I just feel like this is an experience, a club, I like Acme has a really great kind of like lighting setup. It's very dark and it's very cozy and intimate, like that's what we should all be striving for. But then you go to some clubs and it's like a giant overlit cavern, and, it doesn't really.
Yeah. Well, that's because a lot of clubs are defined as a club very loosely.
Yeah.
It's very loosely on what they mean by a comedy club.
Yeah. Good point.
It's like the Fish and Sticks restaurant has a comedy club, and it's just like their dock. You know what I mean? Like,
the pole barn.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, there's a lot of clubs that probably not really a good club. Oh, do you have like a particular writing process? Do you like devote so much time to write, or is it more of a just kind of when you think of things?
Um, I guess it's more about when I say, I should probably write tomorrow. So I go grab my book and used to go to a coffee shop and sit down, force myself. And a lot of times nothing comes out. Or I'll think of something and put it in my iPhone and then work on it later at open mic or whatever. But I used to write out every joke before I would try it, because I think I was like unsure of how to make it funny. But now if I just have like an rough idea, I'll just go on stage and say it a few times and then record it and listen to it. And so it's kind of evolved over the years, I guess, to where but I do just force myself to go right when I feel like I'm getting lazy. Or it's like, but I don't have a routine. It's not like every day, every hour, X amount of time or whatever.
Yeah. Now we are in the pandemic. We've brought that up a couple times. Right now, comedy's a little different, but I see that you did some Zoom shows. You did the Acme show. How was that for you? And how'd you feel about that?
It was really fun. And I mean that in the sense that it was, for what we tried to do, which is to put 400 people on a Zoom call and, unmute some of them so you could hear laughter. I mean, I tip my cap to Brandon and Jackie Cation for figuring out how to do that. Like it's pretty amazing. Give everybody a code to log in if they buy a ticket. I mean, it's something that it's just, for people that are younger than me, it's like, no big deal. You just log into Zoom and put in, but for me, this is amazing. And, you're like looking at all the people staring at you, and we're in our bedroom upstairs. It's just like, it's mind boggling. Like if you would have told me, in early March that, in 2 months you'll be in your bedroom telling jokes to 400 people, I would have said, no way. What? So. And it was fun. It was fun to be creative and fun to do that thing that we do. And and is it the same, or will it ever replace live comedy? Not in a million years, but
yeah, I totally agree with that.
But it was fun. We both had a really good time. So
yeah, that's good. I've had fun doing some of them. I mean, I feel like if the people that are putting them on put, time and effort into making them the best that they possibly can, it is a good experience, and having certain situations controlled, like I know a lot of, I imagine Acme being, such a great club, they're probably putting a lot of effort into controlling stuff because, there's been a lot of the Zoom bombs and things like that or whatever. And, and you get people that are rude or whatever, or can be rude and heckle or whatever. But if it's controlled and run properly, they are fun. And it's nice to be able to hear real laughter.
Yeah.
Instead of throwing our jokes into the void.
Yeah. The one that really is hard for me is the one where it's like an Instagram host. And so you're like telling jokes just to one person. And if they don't, it's just like, right? You get it? Oh, okay.
Yeah.
That's one.
Yeah, I did some Instagram stuff, and I was like, well, I can see the reactions, and this is kind of fun, but it's also, and then I, did some Facebook stuff too, and I've found that the Zoom stuff has been the funner stuff.
Yeah,
being able to hear the laughter and stuff like that, and have a little bit of the interaction.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, it's always nice for that. We'll kind of wrap up, and I'll get to some of the standard stuff I like to do at the end, because we talk about so much dark stuff. I like to flip it around and be positive at the end. Do you have a favorite venue that you've performed at so far?
Wow. I will say that my favorite place to perform on a Saturday night, early show type thing is downtown Zanies in Chicago. That was always kind of my favorite room. I don't know if you've been there or not.
No, heard of it, but
yeah, it's been around since 1978. It's kind of the old school comedy club. Like it's long and narrow, and seats about 100 people, and they pack them in just like wall to wall. I mean, just And so when I was coming up, I got to work with some really good comics. Like I got to open up with Bill Burr and John Panette and some really good, big drawing headliners. So to go into that environment on a Saturday night with just electric, and it was just the best. It's still there. I shouldn't say what. Hopefully it'll still be there. But that to me is my favorite. So I'm sure if anyone that's ever been there will understand, but it's just a magical old school comedy, like New York City,
Mm-hmm.
I love that. I love Acme, of course, and I love the new ones like Sisyphus and Comedy Corner Underground, and the room in Fargo. I love all the rooms. I like all of them.
I feel that. Yeah. Any room that does comedy, you got to appreciate that.
Yeah, I mean, I've never been, well, I'm not gonna say that, but I do think like the smaller the venue, the smokier. Like you used to be able to smoke in a lot of these venues, so a lot of them still have like this real thin layer of smoke film, like
Yep.
That's old school, and I don't think we'll ever get back to that. Obviously, we'll never have smoking or whatever, but just that sense that this is where people used to smoke, even.
Yep.
Have you ever been to the Village Vanguard in New York City?
What's that?
Have you ever been to the Village Vanguard in New York
Nope, City? I've actually not been to New York City. I have not really did any comedy on the East Coast. That's like some of my goals.
Yeah.
Is to do that, but
I like stuff that's old. So
yeah. Well, it's definitely like older venues and buildings just in general. They're just you can really appreciate their beauty. Like there's so much history, and you can just feel it in the ambience in a building like that.
I agree. Yeah.
Yeah, which is really, really nice. What's been the best gig that you've done or your best show?
That's a great question. I don't know. I mean, I mean, gosh, I don't know. I'm not saying like there's been so many of them. I don't know. Like it's hard to put best into context because but I would I don't. When I did my album recording, my last album, nice little plug there at the Plus in Eau Claire, I was so happy with how it was. It was like walking on cloud nine, where you're like, that was a really good show, and I got it on tape, so that felt really good. And
that was your second album, right?
Yeah, that was back a couple of years ago, and it just came out, so that was really fun. Being in Wisconsin, where I grew up, and so that was fun. So yeah, I'll say that one.
Oh, right on. That's good. That's a good pick. That's an interesting thing to me. How long it can take for an album to come out. Like I just talked to Wendy, and we were talking about that, and her album came up, because it's available for pre-order, and she told me where she recorded, and I was like, whoa, that had to be a while ago because the venue hasn't been around for a little while. So yeah, to me, so it's just amazing because you just said, you recorded it like 2 years ago and it just came out.
Yeah, it might even been longer than 2 years ago. So yeah, it was, and it's really my fault because, the record label will say, well, what tracks do you want to do? What order? You have to it's like putting a puzzle together. And I think, creative people we can be procrastinators. I mean, anyone can be a procrastinator, but I think when you're dealing with your own art, it's just like, it just racks your brain. The choice it's just about choices. Like even like the cover art, you go through like 15 different thoughts and rough drafts, and and then you're just like, you just get overwhelmed with trying to make creative decisions. So
yeah, absolutely. Because you're trying to put out the best possible art that that you can. So there's a lot of pressure. And I know at least for me, I am my own worst critic. I mean, I've did a couple different album recordings and never really released them because I was like, I don't like how this turned out.
Yeah.
Like, no.
Yeah, I did that a few times too, where you're just like, no. And we overthink it too. I mean, obviously we overanalyze our stuff. It's like whenever I go to an art museum, I feel the same. Like you walk by a Picasso and you're like, well, how did he know when he was done with that? Because it looks like you could have kept going or stopped, or like, how do you know?
Yep.
Like, I don't think anyone's ever happy with what they put out, but
no, not really. You just got to put it out. That's kind of the key. Just put it out, and at least then you've accomplished that. You've got it out into the world.
Yep.
Yeah. That's funny because I actually did that too with some of my stuff. I've just released a couple of the tracks from some of them recordings on SoundCloud just to throw them out, just because I was like, I've been sitting on this and whatever. And one of the recordings was that where I got heckled by my 8th grade teacher. She kept like interrupting the show, and that's why I didn't release the album. And then I was like, I'll release some of the tracks. So I threw some of it up.
Nice.
Put it out there, and it was like, that was good. It was good to get it out there a little bit. Last thing we'll do, I like to end with a silly thing called pick a number. You pick a number between 1 and 20, and then I ask you a random question that coordinates with your number.
Sure. How about 14?
All right, number 14. Your question is pretty hilarious. Do you ever stop and think about the number of butts in the world?
No. I mean, on paper or real?
Right? Yeah, like writing them down.
I've never had that thought before. But
yeah,
I just did now. So
right now it's on our mind. Now after this is over, you'll just be sitting around thinking about that. Like, how many butts are there?
Yeah, my car insurance is going to go up because I'll be distracted. Like counting butts.
You'll be cussing me out. God damn, Dan, and that dumb question. Oh, that's great. I guess I forgot one question too that I do like to ask. So I'll do that real quick. Do you have? And this can be personal or professional. It's your choice, and whatever. What's one of your proudest achievements or accolades thus far? Do you feel?
Oh wow,
I know it's a tough one.
Well, I think going on Letterman was my favorite achievement, just because it was a dream that I checked off the list. So that, I mean, I'll always have that, no matter what happens in the career. So it was just such a warm memory for me. So,
oh, that's great. That's a good pick. That's a good pick. And you're right. It's always nice to be able to check off a goal or a dream off the list.
Yeah,
it's definitely a good experience. Well, where can people find you online and get your album and all that?
Yeah, I should have typed it in my little square right there.
Yeah.
Just at Tim Harmston on Instagram, and Twitter and Facebook is Tim Harmston Comedy, and my website at timharmston.com.
Excellent. All right. Well, thank you so much for joining me, Tim. I appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks, Dan. Have a good one.
The Art of Bombing is a Blitz Entertainment production. Hosted and produced by Dan Bublitz Jr., The Art of Bombing intro music was written and performed by John Holt. All other music used in this podcast was under the Creative Commons license. If you would like to help The Art of Bombing, you can do so by subscribing, rating, and reviewing our show on whatever podcast application you use to listen to The Art of Bombing. For previous episodes, blogs, and more, visit artofbombingpod.com. Have a great week, and remember, stay safe so you can live to love.